She always sat quietly in the back of the music room, careful not to draw attention. Most of the other students were already confident with their instruments. They moved their fingers over the keys like they had been born to play, while she would watch, sometimes wishing she could do the same. Music had always been her comfort, her secret place where she could escape from everything else. But she had never had the chance to show anyone what she could really do. Her teacher often praised the students who were already skilled. "That was excellent," he would say to one, while barely noticing her when she practiced the same piece day after day. Sometimes she would raise her hand, hesitantly, hoping to play a small part of the song for him, only to be brushed aside. "Maybe next time," he would say with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. She would nod, hide a little frown, and return to her corner of the room. Even though nobody seemed to notice her, she didn't give up. Every day after school, she would sit in a quiet corner at home with the old keyboard her parents had bought years ago. The keys were worn, some even sticky, and it didn't sound as rich as the grand piano in the music room. But she didn't care. She loved it. She would close her eyes and imagine the notes flowing smoothly, imagining the music filling a concert hall, the audience holding their breath as she played. She wasn't the fastest learner, and she couldn't read music the way the others could. Every time she tried, the symbols on the page seemed confusing, like a secret language she hadn't yet learned. So she listened. She listened to recordings over and over until the songs were embedded in her memory. She would hum the tunes quietly while walking to school, tapping her fingers on the table, feeling the rhythm in her heart. Music wasn't just something she did. It was who she was. The other students often made it clear that they thought she didn't belong. They would giggle when she made small mistakes during practice sessions, whisper to each other, "She never get it right," or "Why does she even try?" Even the teacher sometimes seemed impatient with her attempts, sighing when she took longer to learn a section of the song. But she didn't let the teasing get to her. Inside, she knew something the others didn't. She loved this too much to give up. Some days were harder than others. There were moments when her fingers wouldn't move the way she wanted, when the notes came out wrong, when she wanted to cry out of frustration. But she would take a deep breath, sit up straight, and try again. She found joy in the small victories, the moments when a tricky sequence finally sounded right, when her fingers finally remembered a difficult passage without thinking. Every tiny improvement was a step closer to what she dreamed of. Even if nobody else noticed at school, the music room felt like a different world. The walls were lined with shiny instruments, and the floor was polished so that the sunlight reflected in warm patterns. Yet despite being surrounded by music, she always felt invisible. She watched the other students, admired their skill, and sometimes felt a pang of jealousy. But it wasn't a bitter feeling. It was a quiet determination. She knew that someday, if she kept practicing, she would have her moment. The moment she longed for wasn't about applause or recognition. It was about proving to herself that she could do it, that all the hours of practice and every small failure had meaning. She imagined herself sitting at the grand piano in the music room, the notes flowing effortlessly, her heart racing with excitement. She imagined the surprise on the faces of those who had doubted her, the silence of the room as everyone listened, completely captivated. It was a vision that kept her going. Even on the hardest days, her parents noticed her dedication, even if they didn't always understand the music herself. They saw her spending hours at the keyboard, her eyes focused, her brow furrowed in concentration. They heard the faint melodies drifting from her room in the evenings, soft and imperfect at first, but slowly becoming more confident. Sometimes they would smile quietly, proud of her persistence, knowing that she was chasing something she truly loved despite all the challenges. She kept showing up to the music room day after day. She listened to every instruction, tried to follow every correction, and never gave up even when the teacher's attention was elsewhere. She watched, learned, and practiced in secret. Slowly, quietly. She was preparing herself for the moment she had been dreaming about for so long, the moment she could show what she was truly capable of. And although no one in the room expected it, there was a quiet strength in her determination, a sense of resilience that grew with every practice session. The whispers, the teasing, and the dismissive glances didn't define her. She defined herself through her music, one note at a time. She believed that one day her music would speak louder than the doubts of anyone around her, even in that back corner. Invisible to most, she was growing. Every day she became a little more confident, a little more certain of her own talent. She knew that her time would come, and she was willing to wait, to practice, to push herself further than anyone imagined. Because deep down she understood that greatness wasn't about being noticed from the start, it was about quietly, steadily and passionately proving yourself until the world could no longer ignore you. And so, day after day she sat at her keyboard, her fingers dancing over the keys, her heart full of hope and determination. The music room may have overlooked her, and the teachers may have doubted her, but she didn't care. She had her music, her passion, and her dreams, and that was enough to keep her going. No matter what anyone else thought, little did she know. The journey she had started in that quiet back row of the music room was about to take a turn that would surprise everyone and change her life forever. She kept practicing at home every evening, long after the sun had gone down and the house had grown quiet. The keyboard she had wasn't fancy, and the sound it produced was far from perfect, but it was enough. Every note she played, even the ones that sounded rough or uneven, carried her determination. She wasn't just learning a song. She was learning patience, persistence, and the feeling that effort mattered more than talent alone. At school, things weren't much different. The other students were still confident, often showing off their skills and receiving praise from the teacher. They practiced together in groups, laughing when one of them played a difficult part correctly. She would sit quietly, occasionally glancing at the sheet music, but mostly listening to the others, storing the sounds and rhythms in her memory. She learned without anyone noticing, her mind absorbing the lessons that others thought she couldn't follow. Some of the students whispered behind her back, thinking she couldn't hear. "She never play that piece correctly," one of them said. "She shouldn't even try," another whispered. Sometimes their words stung and she felt a sharp pang in her chest. But she didn't argue, didn't cry in front of them. Instead, she focused on what she could control: her practice, her persistence, her own improvement. Every night, she reminded herself that their opinions didn't define her ability. She found ways to practice even when it seemed impossible. She tapped rhythms on the kitchen table while waiting for dinner, hummed melodies under her breath while walking to school, and even imagined her fingers gliding across the piano keys when she didn't have the instrument nearby. Music had become a part of her life in a way that no one else understood. It wasn't about competition. It was about connection with herself, with the emotions she wanted to express, and with the dreams she held tightly in her heart. At school, the teacher continued to give attention to the students who were already skilled. When she tried to ask questions or show a small part of her progress, the teacher's attention was often elsewhere. Sometimes he would sigh, saying, "You're not ready for this piece yet," or "Focus on something simpler first." It was discouraging, but she didn't let it stop her. Every word of doubt, every dismissive glance became fuel for her determination. She promised herself that someday she would prove that she was capable. Her evenings at home became more intense. She played slowly at first, making sure her fingers hit the right keys. When she made mistakes, she didn't give up. She repeated the same section over and over until it felt natural. Sometimes she stayed at the keyboard until her fingers ached, her eyes strained, and her back felt stiff. But she welcomed the discomfort, knowing that it was a sign she was pushing herself further than she had before. Improvement, she realized, came from struggle as much as practice. Listening became her secret tool. She would play recordings of the piece she wanted to master, letting the music fill her room, sometimes humming along, sometimes just letting her mind trace the movements of the pianist's fingers. She learned to anticipate each note, to feel the rhythm in her chest, to imagine the rise and fall of the melody as if it were a wave carrying her forward. Without sheet music, without formal lessons, she learned to trust her ear, her memory, and her instincts. Despite all her preparation, she still faced moments of doubt. She wondered if the teachers were right, if she would ever be able to play the piece without mistakes, if she was wasting her time. but each time doubt crept in. She remembered the feeling she got when the notes flowed correctly, when her fingers moved in harmony with her heart. That feeling reminded her why she kept going, why she didn't give up, why she believed in herself even when others did not. One afternoon, during a practice session at school, the teacher announced that they would begin group evaluations for the upcoming performance. Everyone would have a chance to play the piece in front of the class. The students who were already confident whispered excitedly, preparing themselves to shine. She felt a flutter in her stomach, a mixture of nerves and anticipation. Her turn might come soon, and she wondered if she was truly ready when it was her turn. The other students watched with curiosity, some smirking, some whispering that she wouldn't be able to finish the piece. She took a deep breath, adjusted the bench, and placed her fingers on the keys. Her hands trembled slightly, but her mind was focused. She remembered all the hours she had spent practicing alone, all the times she had replayed the piece in her head, all the mistakes that had taught her how to improve. She closed her eyes for a moment and let the music guide her. The first notes she played were careful but clear. The rhythm was steady, and the sound filled the room in a way that made the other students pause. She felt herself becoming more confident as the music continued. Her fingers moved with precision, guided by months of practice and an unwavering determination. The piece was challenging, but she had learned every note by heart, and her love for the music carried her forward. Some of the students looked surprised. They hadn't expected her to play that well, and their expressions showed it. The whispers faded, replaced by a tense silence. The teacher, too, looked taken aback, his eyebrows raised as he listened intently. She noticed the change in their reactions, but didn't let it distract her. She focused entirely on the music, letting it flow naturally, letting it tell the story she had carried in her heart for so long. When she finished the piece, the room was quiet for a few seconds. It felt like time had stopped. She looked up, unsure of what to expect. The other students were no longer whispering or smirking. They were staring, some with wide eyes, some with mouths slightly open. The teacher slowly nodded, a hint of a smile appearing, as if he realized he had underestimated her. She had done something that no one had expected, something that made them see her in a completely different light. The experience changed something inside her. For the first time, she felt that her hard work, her determination, and her love for music were being recognized, even just a little. It wasn't about praise or applause. It was about the validation of her own effort. She realized that she had proven something to herself more than anyone else, that she was capable of achieving what she had dreamed of. Even when others doubted her. From that day on, her confidence grew. She still practiced at home, still devoted hours to the piano, but now she carried a new belief in herself. The whispers and doubts of others no longer had the same power over her. She understood that talent could be nurtured through patience, perseverance, and relentless passion. And even though the journey was far from over, she knew that she had taken a big step toward the moment she had been waiting for, when she could truly shine without hesitation or fear. She returned to her seat in the back of the music room with a quiet sense of accomplishment. She didn't boast, didn't seek attention. She simply smiled to herself, feeling stronger, more determined, and more connected to her music than ever. The journey ahead was still long, and there would be more challenges to face, but she was ready. She had discovered that the real power of music wasn't just in playing the right notes. It was in believing in herself enough to never stop trying, and so she kept practicing, day after day, letting the music guide her, shaping her and strengthening her. Each note she played carried the weight of her dreams, the hours of effort, and the courage it took to keep going. Even though others had doubted her, she had found her own strength. And little did she know, the path she was walking would soon lead her to a moment that would astonish everyone around her, changing the way she was seen and the way she saw herself forever. The day had finally come. The school had announced a small performance event in the music room, and all the students were expected to play the pieces they had been practicing for months. Excitement buzzed through the room like electricity. The confident students whispered to each other, exchanging smiles and joking about who would perform the best. She sat quietly in the back, her heart pounding with a mix of nerves and anticipation. As the performances began, she watched the others play. Some played flawlessly, their fingers moving gracefully across the keys, while others stumbled over tricky sections. Applause followed each performance, and she clapped along, feeling a strange mixture of admiration and anxiety. She had worked so hard, but she couldn't shake the thought that maybe the teachers and students wouldn't believe in her, that perhaps her chance to shine would slip by unnoticed. When it was her turn, a hush fell over the room. The students who had previously smirked or whispered now watched her with curiosity, some with barely hidden doubt. Even the teacher looked at her with raised eyebrows, a quiet question in his eyes. Could she really perform this challenging piece after all this time? She took a deep breath and walked toward the piano. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she held her head high. Every step she took toward the instrument felt heavy, yet filled with purpose. Sitting down at the piano, she positioned her hands on the keys, feeling the familiar grooves beneath her fingers. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, allowing herself to remember all the hours she had spent practicing in secret. The small keyboard at home, the broken keys, the late nights replaying melodies in her mind. Every struggle and every triumph had led to this moment. She opened her eyes and let the music flow. The first notes were careful, deliberate, but perfectly in tune. She felt the rhythm in her heart, guiding her fingers with a confidence that surprised even her. As the piece progressed, she began to move faster, more fluidly, her body swaying gently with the music. She had memorized every note, every pause, every soft and loud passage. It was as though the music had become a part of her, and she no longer had to think about it. She simply played. The room was silent except for the sound of the piano. The other students' whispers had faded, replaced by a tense, focused attention. Even the teacher leaned forward, his expression a mixture of surprise and admiration. He hadn't expected her to play with such precision, such emotion. Her fingers glided over the keys with ease, navigating the most difficult sections flawlessly. Each chord, each note, resonated through the room, capturing the attention of everyone present. For the first time, she didn't feel nervous. She felt alive. The music carried her away from the doubts, from the teasing, from the fear that had followed her for so long. She was no longer the quiet girl in the back row. She was a performer, a storyteller, and the piano was her voice. She poured every ounce of emotion into the music, letting the melody express everything she had held inside her determination. Her struggles, her dreams, and her love for the art. The more she played, the more confident she became. The rhythm of the piece guided her, and her fingers moved as if they had a mind of their own. Every note she struck seemed to fill the room with energy. She felt the connection between herself and the instrument, a bond forged through countless hours of practice. The other students watched in awe, realizing that they had underestimated her all along. The doubts they had whispered, the smirks they had exchanged, vanished in the face of her skill. The climax of the piece approached, the part she had struggled with countless times at home. Her hands flew over the keys faster and more accurately than she had ever imagined possible. The notes soared, each one perfectly placed, echoing through the room. She could hear the teacher's intake of breath, subtle but unmistakable, and she sensed the admiration from the other students. Her confidence surged with each passing second, fueled by the recognition she had longed for. Though she didn't allow herself to think about it, she focused entirely on the music. Finally, the last note lingered in the air, a delicate sound that faded slowly, leaving the room in complete silence. She lifted her hands from the keys, her body trembling slightly from the adrenaline of the performance. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then, slowly, the room erupted not with laughter or whispers, but with applause. It started small, hesitant at first, then grew louder and more enthusiastic as everyone recognized the talent and dedication she had displayed. The teacher stepped forward, his eyes bright with a mixture of pride and surprise. He nodded at her, a quiet acknowledgement of her achievement, and for the first time, he truly saw her. "That was remarkable," he said, his voice carrying a weight that made her heart swell. She had earned his respect, and in that moment, it felt like a lifetime of effort had finally been recognized. The other students approached her. some with smiles, some still wide-eyed, offering congratulations and compliments. Even those who had once doubted her now seemed impressed, acknowledging the skill and emotion she had brought to the performance. She smiled, feeling a warmth she had never experienced before. It wasn't just about being noticed. It was about proving to herself that she could overcome every obstacle, every doubt, and every challenge to reach this moment. That evening, when she returned home, she replayed the performance in her mind. She remembered the first notes, the difficult sections, the moment the piece ended and the room had gone silent. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not just because others had recognized her talent, but because she had believed in herself all along. She had faced doubt, criticism, and even mockery, and she had emerged stronger. From that day forward, everything changed. The music room was no longer a place of invisibility. She had earned a place of respect, a recognition of her dedication and talent. She continued to practice, but now with renewed confidence. Every note she played carried the memory of that day, reminding her that perseverance and love for her craft could overcome even the harshest skepticism. And while the journey was far from over, she had taken a monumental step. She had faced her fears, challenged the expectations of those around her, and shown that true talent could shine even in the most unlikely of places. She had discovered that greatness wasn't about being the most noticed or the most praised. It was about the quiet, relentless pursuit of one's passion, the courage to continue when no one else believes in you, and the willingness to let your heart guide your hands. As she prepared for the next day of practice, she felt a calm excitement. The music she loved had finally become a bridge between her dreams and reality. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more difficult pieces to master, and more moments where doubt would creep in. But she also knew that she had proven something crucial, that she could rise above expectation, that her determination was stronger than any obstacle, and that her love for music would always lead her forward. That performance was more than just notes played correctly. It was a turning point, a moment of transformation. The quiet girl in the back row had shown the world, and herself, that persistence, patience, and passion could create something extraordinary. And in her heart she knew that this was only the beginning. After her performance, the room seemed different. The other students no longer looked at her with doubt or amusement. Their expressions were filled with surprise, curiosity, and even admiration. She returned to her seat quietly, her heart still racing from the intensity of the moment. For a long time, no one spoke, and the silence felt heavier than the applause she had received moments before. She realized that something had shifted, not just in their perception of her, but in her own understanding of herself. The teacher, who had often overlooked her efforts, now looked at her with genuine respect. He approached her after class, his eyes softening as he spoke. "I didn't expect that," he admitted, almost quietly. "You played with more control and emotion than anyone I've seen in this class." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that made her stomach tighten with pride. For the first time, she felt that her dedication had been noticed by someone whose opinion mattered deeply. Some of the students came over, hesitant at first, then slowly offering words of praise. "I didn't know you could play like that," one whispered. Another said, "That was amazing. I wish I could play like you." Even those who had once laughed or made remarks about her ability now seemed unsure how to act around her. The mocking smiles were gone, replaced by genuine acknowledgement. She smiled politely, feeling a strange mix of relief, satisfaction, and a little disbelief. It was almost surreal to be seen this way after years of being overlooked. Walking home that day, she replayed the events in her mind. Every note, every chord, every subtle movement of her hands on the keys came alive again as she remembered the performance. She thought about how the teacher had reacted, the way her classmates' expressions had changed, and the sudden hush that had fallen over the room. Her chest swelled with pride, not because she wanted attention, but because she knew the journey that had brought her here. The hours of practice, the quiet determination, and the countless times she had refused to give up had finally made a difference. The next few days at school were different. She noticed the small changes, the way the teacher now offered her tips and guidance during practice sessions, The way some students asked her questions about how she had learned the piece, and the respectful nods when she walked into the music room. These small gestures felt like acknowledgement, proof that her efforts were not in vain. But she didn't let it distract her from continuing to practice and improve. She understood that respect had to be earned over time, not just in a single performance. At home, her evenings became more focused. She practiced not only the piece she had mastered but also new, more challenging compositions. She wanted to prove to herself that the performance wasn't a one-time success, that she could continue to grow and reach higher levels of skill. The broken keyboard she had at home seemed almost magical now. Every note she played on it carried the memory of the performance, reminding her that determination could turn even the simplest tools into instruments of transformation. One afternoon, she was joined by a few classmates who wanted to practice together. They were tentative at first, unsure if she would accept their company, but she welcomed them. She shared what she had learned about rhythm, timing, and listening carefully to the music. Slowly, the group began to work together, each learning from the other. The teacher noticed and encouraged them, giving advice while letting her take the lead in small ways. It was the first time she felt like she belonged in the group, not just as a student, but as someone whose voice and talent mattered. Even as her confidence grew, she stayed humble. She didn't boast or show off. Instead, she focused on the music itself. She understood that true skill wasn't about impressing others, but about expressing something meaningful through her playing. Each note was a reflection of her dedication, her struggles, and her love for the instrument. And the more she played, the more she realized that music wasn't just about hitting the right keys, it was about communicating, sharing a story without words, and touching the hearts of those who listened. The teacher, too, began to change. He encouraged her to take on more challenging pieces, gradually letting her perform in front of larger groups and even during small school events. He acknowledged her growth publicly, something he had rarely done before. The other students watched, learning that hard work, patience, and determination could triumph over initial appearances or assumptions. She had become a quiet example, a living proof that perseverance could break through even the strongest doubts. Her classmates' attitudes continued to evolve. Some who had previously teased or ignored her now sought advice, wanting to understand how she had practiced and memorized the difficult piece. She shared tips generously, showing them the importance of listening carefully, repeating sections slowly, and never giving up when things felt impossible. The relationships that had once been tense or dismissive began to grow into a quiet camaraderie built on mutual respect. She was no longer invisible. She had become a part of the community in a way she had never expected. Even with all this recognition, she never stopped striving. Each day she challenged herself with more complex melodies, experimenting with expression, timing, and emotion. She wanted her music to continue growing, to reflect the depth of her dedication and the joy she felt in playing. Every evening at home, she would sit at her keyboard, sometimes smiling at the memories of her first major performance, sometimes lost in thought as she imagined new pieces she wanted to master. She also began to notice a deeper change within herself. She felt more confident not only in her music but in other areas of her life. She learned that persistence and focus could carry her through challenges beyond the piano. Tasks that had once seemed impossible now felt manageable, because she had proven to herself that effort and patience could yield results. She felt stronger, capable, and ready to face whatever challenges came next. Yet, despite the growing recognition and her own personal growth, she never forgot the quiet girl who had once sat in the back row, unnoticed and doubted. That version of herself remained a constant reminder of where she had come from, of the struggles that had shaped her. She carried that memory with pride, knowing that it was her perseverance and quiet dedication that had led her to this moment of transformation. She began to see the music room in a new light. No longer just a place of practice, it became a space of possibility, a place where effort, courage, and passion could create remarkable change. Every time she walked in, she felt a sense of purpose, a reminder that her talent had been earned through determination, not luck. She understood that recognition was fleeting, but the skills, discipline, and confidence she had gained would stay with her forever. As weeks turned into months, her skills continued to grow. She played more confidently in front of her peers and even started helping younger students learn basic pieces, encouraging them to find their own love for music. She had become more than just a student. She had become a source of inspiration, showing others that quiet determination and consistent effort could overcome doubt and criticism. Her influence extended beyond her own performances, touching the learning experiences of those around her. Her teacher often watched her with pride, sometimes saying quietly, "You've come a long way," and other times letting her take the lead during group lessons. She realized that he, too, had learned from her persistence, that her dedication had reminded him of the importance of patience, encouragement, and belief in every student. She had changed not only her own path, but also the way others approached teaching and learning. Through it all, she remained grounded. She continued to practice diligently, never taking her progress for granted. She celebrated her achievements quietly, savoring the small victories and recognizing the moments of growth that others might overlook. Her journey had taught her that true accomplishment wasn't just about recognition or praise. It was about the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had done her best day after day, and had transformed herself through effort, resilience, and love for her craft. And even as she prepared for the next performances, the next challenges, and the next difficult pieces, she carried a quiet confidence in her heart. She knew that no matter what doubts or obstacles arose, she had the strength to overcome them. She had learned that talent alone was not enough, but determination, perseverance, and passion could achieve extraordinary things. Her journey was far from over, but this part of it, this moment of recognition, growth, and transformation had laid a foundation for the incredible achievements yet to come. The once quiet girl in the back row had become a performer, a mentor, and a symbol of what dedication and self-belief could accomplish. And as she continued to play, she knew that her music would always carry the story of her journey, inspiring others and reminding herself of the power of never giving up. The weeks that followed her breakthrough performance were filled with a quiet, growing excitement. She could feel a change, not only in how others viewed her, but in how she viewed herself. The music room, which had once felt like a place of invisibility and doubt, now seemed like a space of possibility. Every time she stepped inside, she felt a sense of purpose, a sense that her dedication and hard work were finally paying off in ways she had only dreamed of. The teacher, who had once barely noticed her, now gave her careful guidance. He suggested more challenging pieces that she had never dared to attempt before, and encouraged her to perform them in front of the class. At first, the thought was intimidating. These compositions were much harder than anything she had practiced before. But she remembered the way she had felt during her first performance, the quiet confidence, the thrill of making the music her own. And she knew that she could rise to the challenge. Her classmates also treated her differently. Some who had once mocked or ignored her now came to her for advice. They asked her how she practiced, how she memorized difficult passages, and how she kept her confidence even when they doubted her. She shared her experiences patiently, never boasting or acting superior, but simply showing that dedication and persistence were more powerful than talent alone. Slowly, a sense of respect and camaraderie grew among them. They began to see her not just as a talented student, but as someone who inspired them to work harder and believe in themselves. Every day, she continued to practice at home on her keyboard, which had once been just a simple, worn-out instrument. Now it was a companion, a teacher, and a friend. She experimented with new techniques, tried to play faster, smoother, and with more feeling. Sometimes she would stay up late, her fingers moving tirelessly across the keys, repeating sections over and over until they felt natural. Every mistake was no longer a source of frustration but a lesson, a stepping stone toward mastery. The school held a special concert one evening, inviting parents, teachers, and students to watch. This was her chance to perform not just for the classroom, but for an audience that included people who had never heard her play before. She felt the familiar nervousness in her stomach, the tension in her fingers, and the flutter in her chest. But she also felt something new, a quiet confidence that had been built from months of practice, struggle, and small victories. She had prepared herself for this moment, and she was ready. As she walked toward the grand piano on the stage, the audience quieted. Her classmates watched with a mixture of admiration and awe. The teacher gave her an encouraging nod. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, and then she let her fingers touch the keys. The first notes came out soft and deliberate, each one resonating through the hall. She felt the music flow through her, guiding her hands as she played. The piece was long and challenging, with moments of rapid notes and delicate passages that required both speed and precision. She remembered every hour of practice, every mistake, every time she had refused to give up. Her fingers moved almost instinctively now, as if the music had become a part of her body and mind. She played not just with skill, but with feeling, letting the emotion behind every note shine through. As the performance continued, she noticed the audience leaning forward, completely absorbed. The sound of the piano filled the room, carrying with it the story of her journey, the struggle, the persistence, the quiet determination, and the love she had for her music. Every chord, every subtle pause, every variation of tempo spoke to her experiences, and she realized that the music itself was her voice, telling her story without words. By the time she reached the climax of the piece, her heart was racing, but her hands moved with perfect control. The challenging sections, the notes she had once stumbled over, flowed effortlessly now. She felt the culmination of all her hard work in every movement, every sound. The audience was silent, hanging on to each note as if they were witnessing something extraordinary. Even the teacher, who had been strict and often impatient, watched with a look of amazement. Clearly impressed by her mastery, the final notes lingered in the hall, echoing softly before fading into silence. For a moment, no one moved. The room was filled with awe, a collective pause as everyone processed what they had just heard. And then the applause began slowly at first, then growing louder and stronger. The sound washed over her, but she didn't feel overwhelmed. She smiled quietly, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. She had done more than play a piece perfectly. She had shared herself, her journey, and her passion with others. After the performance, the teacher approached her, his eyes bright with pride. "I always knew you had talent," he said, "but what you've shown tonight is beyond anything I expected. You have worked hard, and it shows. You should be proud of yourself." His words felt like a warm light, affirming all the effort she had put in and all the challenges she had overcome. For the first time, she felt completely recognized, not just for her skill, but for her persistence and determination. Her classmates crowded around her, offering congratulations and expressing genuine admiration. Some who had doubted her now apologized quietly, realizing how wrong they had been. She accepted their words graciously, understanding that their respect had been earned through her dedication, not through boasting or showing off. She felt a sense of connection with them that she had never felt before. They had witnessed her journey and were now part of it, sharing in the joy and awe of her performance. That evening, as she returned home, she reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the countless hours spent practicing alone, the moments of doubt, the small victories, and the patience she had learned along the way. She realized that her journey wasn't just about playing the piano. It was about discovering her own strength, her resilience, and her ability to overcome obstacles. She understood that every struggle she had faced had prepared her for this moment of triumph. Over the next weeks and months, her confidence continued to grow. She played more challenging pieces, explored new styles of music, and even began to teach younger students some of what she had learned. She became a source of inspiration, showing that persistence, passion, and dedication could turn obstacles into opportunities. Her story was no longer just her own, it had become a lesson for others, a reminder that hard work and belief in oneself could achieve extraordinary results. She also realized that the recognition she had received was not the most important part of her journey. What mattered most was the love she felt for her music, the joy of playing, and the knowledge that she had pushed herself to become the best version of herself. Every note she played, whether in front of an audience or alone at home, carried the essence of her journey, the patience, determination, and quiet strength that had brought her here. Even as she looked toward the future, she knew that her journey was ongoing. There would always be new challenges, more difficult pieces, and moments of doubt. But she had learned something invaluable, that perseverance, focus, and passion were far more powerful than fear or criticism. She had faced obstacles, exceeded expectations, and discovered her own strength. And she knew that, no matter what came next, she had the courage and determination to succeed. Her story had come full circle. The quiet, overlooked student who had once sat in the back row, ignored and doubted, had become a performer who commanded attention and respect. She had transformed not only her own path, but also the way her teachers and classmates saw her. Through hard work, patience, and unwavering dedication, she had achieved what once seemed impossible, and as she sat at the piano, playing softly to herself in the quiet of her room, she smiled. Every note was a reminder of her journey, a celebration of her growth, and a promise of all the music and achievements still to come. She had learned that true success was not just about recognition, it was about the journey, the persistence and the love for what you do. Her music, and the story behind it, would continue to inspire her and those around her, showing that even the most underestimated and overlooked can achieve greatness when they refuse to give up.